Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Sean Yoder, and today we are doing Chapter 13. This is the first of the Imperfect Competition series. We're doing Monopoly Day. Now, if you think back to Chapter 12, we covered all the different market failures, and Imperfect Competition, we're going to be doing a series of 3 of these. The first is this one, Monopoly. So let's work on some definitions first. Imperfect competition is any industrial structure that is not perfect competition. Now, your heads may be swimming at this point. Remember, we covered perfect competition in chapters 7 through 9. Perfect competition has certain requirements, like each firm is small, relative to the industry, there's free entry and exit, all the goods are the same. Well, I just went to Starbucks this morning. I have my wonderful cup of Starbucks coffee in my hand as we speak. I'm going to take a sip right now. Okay. Anti-student abuse nectar. And if it was perfect competition, that would mean Dutch Brothers or the coffee hut just down the road from me is exactly the same as Starbucks coffee, and anybody who is a coffee snob like me can tell you that there are very, very big differences in the coffees, and personally, I am not a fan of Dutch Brothers, partly because I like the differences in the different blends of the coffees at Starbucks, and a lot of times the Dutch Brothers stuff is too sweet for me. So that idea of a homogeneous product, that everything is the same, is violated. Now, whenever one of those assumptions of perfect competition that we covered back in chapter 7, primarily, are violated, the firm gets something called market power. Now, market power is where the firm can raise price without losing all of its sales instantly. Well, that wasn't very good. There we go. That's better. Without losing all of its sales instantly. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll make money if they raise their price. It just means that they won't lose everything. So remember going to the grocery store, right? You need some basic flour. You see 3 types, brand Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. Alpha's 45 cents, Bravo's 50 cents, Charlie's 65 cents. Which one do you buy? You buy the cheapest if it's the exact same stuff in the bag. This is the idea here. Now, it's not exactly the same stuff in the bag. Maybe Charlie is organic flour. You with me? It's very, very close substitute, but it's different. What we're going to be doing for chapters 13, 14, 15 is analyzing where firms get their market power, where they get the ability to raise prices a little bit without losing everything. So if you remember perfect competition, in perfect competition, the firm lost every single bit of their sales if they raised price above the market price 1 penny. It was a horizontal demand curve. That's no longer going to be the case. So we're going to do 3. The first one we're doing today is monopoly. Now, the key feature of monopoly, there is a single firm, but entry of new firms is blocked. So back in perfect competition, you had free entry and exit of firms. That's no longer a case. So when you hear monopoly, you need to think entry and exit is blocked. Monopoly, blocked. Monopoly, blocked. Blocked means monopoly. And if I say monopoly and blocked, no entry and exit, it's blocked. Blocked entry, monopoly. Blocked entry, monopoly. Block entry, monopoly. Monopoly equals block entry. And if I say this enough, I'm hoping that when it comes to your exam, you're actually going to remember it, because monopoly means blocked entry. You cannot have a monopoly without blocked entry. Why? Because a monopoly will earn profits, and that profits makes people want to get in. So if they want to get in, just like we did on your accreditation exercise, just like we did in Chapter 9, if they want to get in, they can't get in order for it to stay one single firm. If they can get in, it's no longer a monopoly by definition. So to be a monopoly, it's got to be blocked. So the assumption violated for monopoly is entry and exit new firms. The second one we're going to do next time is oligopoly. In this case, it's size. A firm is large enough to affect prices. So an example of this are the airline industry or potentially Walmart and Target. Those would be oligopoly. Apple Corporation's oligopoly. And then finally, the last one is called monopolistic competition. And in this one, each product is just slightly different. There's no barrier to entry. There's no huge competitor in the group. It's just they're different. Think a specialty clothing store. Anybody can start a clothing store, but so there's no entry and exit. And yeah, there's some big ones, but they're really not that huge. Anybody can get into this industry, but you know, some stores cater to men, some to women, some to children, some to old people, old folks fashion. You know, the old grandma's nightgown that flows forever. I remember my mom getting that finally and going, yeah, congratulations, Mom, you've made it to old. You have officially successfully reached old status. It's over for you. Anyway, moving on. So in a pure monopoly, which is what we're doing today, there is a single firm. Solo, uno, one. Not multiples, not a bunch. There's one that produces a product for which there are no close substitutes. Now let's be careful here. Let's talk about this for a minute. No close substitutes. Well, I make brand X burgers, and nobody else can make brand X burgers because I have the copyright and the trademark for brand X. Therefore, I have a monopoly on brand X. No, dude. Anybody can make a hamburger. There's a close substitute. When we think about monopoly, think about someone who makes a life-saving medicine that's under patent that can't be duplicated, or right now there are multiples going, but a vaccine. You know, we're in the COVID world. Imagine if Pfizer was the only one who made the vaccine. Moderna didn't work. Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, what if those didn't work? And it was just Pfizer. That would be a monopoly. Now the key to monopoly, the second thing that you have to have is a barrier to entry. Monopoly, excuse me, means barrier to entry. You cannot have a monopoly without barriers to entry. In the case of medicine, it's usually the patent law. We're going to go through a bunch of these. But there is something preventing other firms from coming and competing with the monopoly. Now, as a result, monopolies can earn economic profits in the long run. They're the only industrial organization that can earn economic profits in the long run. The rest do not earn long-run economic profits. This slide is making the error. Here's the demand for brand expert. Well, there's a ton of substitutes. Now, how you define your market kind of matters, right? You get really inelastic demand for food, because what is the substitute for food? Maybe some vitamins, or you'll dead. Now, if you substitute out food, you can go to meat. Well, we can take out vegetables and fruits and grains, okay. And then beef is more specific. So as you get narrower of a definition, generally the elasticity, the demand elasticity for your good becomes more and more and more elastic. But If you're a monopolist, you're facing usually inelastic demand curves because you are the one, there is no substitute. Now, in perfect competition, each firm is small relative to the market. This is not true in monopoly. Monopoly does not constitute a part of the market. It is the market. It's the only, it's it. It's all of it. It's El Jefe. For those of you who like to go to El Puertos down in Salem, yeah, be sure to go in there, Alberto's on Market Street. Be sure to go in the mornings and ask for El Jefe. It's not on the menu, but oh. And by the way, be sure to take the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit with you because you'll probably need them to eat the entire thing. It's huge. Unless you, like that, are El Jefe, and then maybe you could finish that off. It's pretty good. So the monopolist sees the entire market. It sees the downward sloping demand curve. However, the monopolist, because this downward sloping demand curve, assuming it must give everybody the same price. If it wants to sell more units, it has to lower the price because it's facing a normal downward sloping demand curve. So it's a trade-off. Do I lower prices and sell more units, or do I raise price and sell more? So I played this online game. It's a lot of fun, caused a lot of trouble. And I was having this conversation with somebody recently. And we were talking about business, and we were talking about the business of the game. Now, this game generally sells bundles of game items for $100, which seems like a lot. And they move you into it slowly, so you kind of get used to spending that amount of money. And some people can afford it, some people can't. And if you don't buy anything for a long period of time, they might give you a discounted one. But in general, I keep hearing this argument. Well, wait a minute. They should lower the price, and they will make up for lost revenue of lowering the price by increased volumes of sales. Now, the argument they're making is an elasticity argument. But you and I both know that's not always true based upon the research of Chapter 5, based upon the teachings there. If you lower the price from a $100 pack to an $80 pack, that's a 20% drop in price. If your sales do not increase by 20%, then your net revenue is going to go down. So yeah, you're probably going to get an increase in sales, but if the sales only increase 10%, then you're actually going to be losing some of your revenue. So monopolists are facing this trade-off all the time. So here's a table. Here's 10 units for the monopolist. Here's price. You've seen this before. Quantity and price. So what is total revenue? Quantity times price. 1 times 10 is 10, 2 times 9 is 8. Now, just like we did with cost, notice now we have marginal revenue. Marginal revenue in perfect competition is no longer the demand curve. So 10 minus 0 is 10, 18 minus 10 is 8, et cetera, et cetera. So here, at marginal revenue equals 0, you know that at that point, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight it for you, at this point where the marginal revenue crosses the x-axis, if you were to graph it, that point is where your own price elasticity is equal to 1. At all prices down here, so we know that if they lower prices up here, they'll get more revenue. If they raise prices up here, they'll get more revenue. So this is the point of maximum revenue. But remember, the firms, the monopolist is not a revenue maximizing firm. They are a profit maximizing. And where does every firm maximize profits regardless of industry structure, They do it where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So here's our demand curves points. Here's our marginal revenue. Please notice that up in the top, there is one point in common between marginal revenue and the total and the demand curve total revenue. All right. So the demand curve here, read off price, has one point in common here at 10 with marginal revenue. So this is a useful little trick for you. If you have a linear equation for a demand curve, so for example, 50 minus 2Q. If you have a linear demand curve, whatever your x-intercept is, let's say it was 25 here, if you just divide it by 2, so at 12.5, that's where this line is going to cross. And then with your y-intercept up here on this point, you can get the equation for the marginal revenue curve. Now, this only works for linear demand curves, which, let's be honest, these only occur in EC201 and introductory economics classes, but it's a useful tool. Notice where it crosses the x-axis, where marginal revenue equals 0, that's your maximum total revenue. That's where your elasticity is equal to -1. So your elasticity right here, that price quantity combo off of your demand curve, that's going to be where the firm is going to get maximum revenue. But remember, the firm is trying to make profits. Where is the point of maximum revenue? Where marginal revenue, right here, crosses the marginal cost. That occurs right here. So again, let me remind you of the steps to get you through these questions. Step 1, find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That occurs at this point right here. Step 2, draw a vertical line at that point. Now, price to the consumer. Guys, you want to make notes of this. Be prepared to go back on this recording and listen to it again. This is really critical. The price to the consumer is read off your demand curve. So you come up at 5 units here until you get to the demand curve. That's a point A. That price is $6. The average total cost is read off the average total cost curve. So you come up at 5 units until you get to point B. Average total cost of the firm is $4.50. So this gray box, $1.50 vertical times in 5 units is going to be equal to your profits. Now, I have something I want to show you here. Price equals marginal cost for the demand curve occurs at this point right there. So this area, that yellow area right there, that triangle, actually that kind of didn't work well. Let's erase all that and try that again. So that triangle, this triangle here, remember back from chapter 12, which we covered earlier. From society's point of view, we should keep producing it until price equals marginal cost, where the benefits to society from making and consuming the good are equal to the cost to society, including opportunity cost, of producing, and that's at this point. So notice the monopolist is going to be producing to the left of that point. The monopolist, if left to its own devices, is going to choose to produce here at 5. And that's going to leave this yellow area as societal deadweight loss. This is lost economic value. And as a result, in many cases, society may disallow monopoly. We'll talk more about that in a second. But I want you to remember, more often than not, there is one theoretical case in which this deadweight loss doesn't occur, and I'll explain to you in a minute. But in general, if you have a monopoly, there will be a deadweight loss to the monopoly. In this case, that's the area in yellow. Now, there is no independent supply curve in monopoly. Monopolists have a supply point. They are the industry. They're not going to supply all the way up independently. They supply here. That's all they're going to supply, unless the hand of government forces them off. Demand is going to have to shift, or something on the demand side is going to have to change to realize a different supply point. A monopolist has no supply curve that is independent of demand. It has its own point, and that's it. So back in perfect competition, you had your industry as supply and demand. Here's the equilibrium price. Here's the demand curve facing the really small firms, and they produce down here so that all the efficiencies are realized and everything is awesome. Okay, here's a monopolist. Now, I'm assuming linear marginal costs, long-run, marginal long-run average costs, okay? Society says price equals marginal cost. We should produce 4,000 in perfect competition. In this graph, the monopolist will choose 2,000. So this triangle, because we have a nice flat marginal cost curve for this example, this triangle is a deadweight loss. So notice your consumer surplus under monopoly is only this amount here. That is consumer surplus, top triangle. I'd also like you to see that you have this red area. This red area represents the producer surplus. Now, I mentioned before that producer surplus, producer surplus, what's another name for it? Go back to Chapter 4. That's firms' economic profits. And then your deadweight loss, let's do blue. So the deadweight loss will be this area in really deep blue, right? So there's a job on this slide. If you wanted a job, there's a job right here. So monopolists have an incentive to cheat the market, to act as a monopolist, and to cheat consumers. What is the damage to consumers? Well, the old producer surplus was this entire triangle. The old consumer surplus, was this entire triangle. However, under the monopolist, the consumers only get this top triangle. This blue triangle is damage to society, all of society from the company's actions. And then the company gets this red bit as profits. Now the job is this. Let's say a firm is being sued or is potentially being charged with being a monopolist. So somebody is going to have to go in and find the size of this triangle, the deadweight loss to society for damages to society, and they're going to have to find the size of this rectangle and testify about that in a court of law. These are forensic economists. There are a bunch of them. I know several firms that do this. And literally, that's what you do. You'll learn how to do this with a master's degree in economics or a doctorate. You'll kind of have the idea of how to do it with a bachelor's degree, but usually it's an advanced degree. But you can make a really good living for yourself doing that. So that's a job. But the damage to society is this blue triangle here. So we talked about monopoly. You cannot have a monopoly without barriers to entry. Barriers to entry equals monopoly. Monopoly equals barriers to entry. So what are the barriers to entry? What causes this? Well, one is called a natural monopoly. And as the name indicates, these things occur in nature. These are not special. These are not nefarious. This is just the nature of the business naturally produces a monopoly. The classic example of this is electricity generation. So here we have a long run average cost curve, this big sweeping one. Now, if you can produce electricity here at 500,000 units, your average costs are $1. But if you can't produce at this scale, if you can only make 100,000 units, your average costs are $5. So think of electricity generation, making a power plant. Yeah, I can put solar panels on everybody's houses, but that's incredibly expensive, and the cost per kilowatt hour of doing that is huge. Versus having a huge power plant, the cost to everybody else is small. So what tends to happen? Once this is established, let me go ahead and switch to my highlighter again. Once you end up with this guy being established, you're not going to be able to enter. Any firm that tries to enter at this scale is just going to be kneecapped by the other firm that can sell at, 20% of the price. Why would you spend $5 for electricity when you could spend $1, right? As a result, any firm at scale 1 will generally go out of business, and scale 2 will just dominate the market naturally. Now, it's not because scale 2 is necessarily exploiting its advantage. It's because scale 1 cannot get past the barrier to entry to get there. So herein we have a philosophical problem for society. I just showed back here, monopolists generate deadweight loss, and it's true. However, there's so much in the way of cost efficiencies here with a natural monopoly. Do we really want to break up a scale 2 business to make more scale 1s and do everything at 5 times the cost? So in general, what society has decided is, no, we'll let scale 2 exist, but we'll have the government watch them to make sure that they do not abuse the power of their monopoly. They're called regulated monopolies. Generally, electric power companies are these types. Now, there's a lot of jobs here. I pulled this several years ago, back in 2018. This is from the Salem Public Utility Commission. What do you need? You need a bachelor's degree in economics to apply for it, right? And 4 years of work experience. But understand this is for a level 3 position. So you get a level 1 or 2, and within 4 years, you're qualified to do this. Do the math on that. 7752 times 12. That's a decent job. And the Public Utility Commission hires all the time. This is where a degree in economics, if you're interested in energy economics and regulation, you can contribute to the public good, you can help people, but this is where there's a job. Now, the PUC, they're the ones who watch this kind of monopoly and make sure that they don't abuse their power. And they add value to society because we're allowing the monopoly to exist, so we're getting lower rates for everything, but they're not able to exploit their monopoly for their own profits necessarily at the harm of everybody in society. Think about it. If the electric utility company that runs the wires and everything and the distribution, if they said, you know what, we kind of want to just charge you. Yeah, the heat's going really badly in the summer, like last summer during COVID. Yeah, the swimming pools are closed, the movie theaters are closed, we got you. We think we're going to quadruple your electricity prices right now. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do otherwise? Because they, you know, that's where the Public Utility Commission would step in and say, you're not allowed to do that. Patents. Patents are a means by which temporary monopoly is granted. Now, the idea for a patent goes like this. It costs money to innovate. So right now I'm using my iPhone and my brand new headphones. I love my new AirPod Max headphones. They really drown out the nonsense pretty well. And whenever you innovate something, it costs a ton of money to do it. So society has decided that we will grant a temporary monopoly to inventors. In that way, the inventor, if the market really values what the maker makes, can produce it and make it. However, the economic profits are going to be temporary, but that way they can recover their research and design costs. And the possibility of having temporary economic profits will incentivize people to create. Think about my iPhone for a minute. If Apple couldn't have gotten, let's be clear, iPhones cost officially a hell of a lot. You know, I jokingly say it costs you your firstborn child to get one. Why would Apple have gone through the process of making the iPhone and with it revolutionizing telecommunication? Before the iPhone, we were in Blackberryville. Oh, God. And Palm Pilots. Oh. If you don't know what those are, be glad. You know, patents protect medicines. Why do pharmaceutical companies make new medicines? Because they have a patent on it and they can theoretically make a profit in selling that medicine and make the world better off. So the question is, answer me this. Are we better off as a society for having COVID vaccines and COVID treatments? Or would we rather just roll our luck without it? You know, take your point. Are we better off having iPhones? Are we better off having the innovations and the new things that we've made? Or should we not have? So the idea is that patents are temporary barriers to entry, after which point the temporary protection drops once that incentive has run its course, and temporary protection drops, and then it competes in the free market, and we realize the rest of the efficiency gains later. Government rules. Oh, I love this one. Governments can impose entry restrictions. Barriers to entry, the financial industry has had lots of barriers to entry, but I remember once in the UK, there was a man who was granted from the king years and years and years ago, a monopoly over a bridge. So just like in Salem, where you have Salem and then you have West Salem, a city grew up on both sides of the bridge. And so this man basically could charge a toll. However, the monopoly from the royal means they couldn't put another bridge for 20 miles up or down river. So basically, if you wanted to get to the other side of the city, you had to pay this guy a bridge. Well, this guy had no heirs, so decided to sell his crown-granted monopoly, made a ton of money in the process. There are some things, and even in the U.S. government, and in U.S. law where, unfortunately, a non-thinking lawmaker slipped up and wrote something in the law that basically creates a monopoly or something close to it. And these government rules, you know, this is where lobbyists try to get lawmakers to not pay attention sometimes, or to write the language in such a way that the law only affects one person and or limits who can do things to one firm or one person. So government rules can create monopolies. I love this. Ownership of a scarce factor of production. So, all right, let me tell you a story. Do you guys like American football? Not everybody does. But with American football, there's a team in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And where did the Pittsburgh Steelers get their name? No, they don't steal as in thief or nick something. They get it because the steel industry was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And years ago, two creative lads named Carnegie and Rockefeller, under U.S. Steel, went around, and in order to make steel, you need something called coke. Now, this is not the coke you drink, and this is not the coke you sniff. Coke is a byproduct or tied to coal mining. And so they went up to all the coal miners and basically bought the rights to all the coke from the coal mines. So Pittsburgh was a great steel manufacturer. Now this went, and Pittsburgh made all the steel in the country, hence the name Steelers. Okay. Now, at this point, the U.S. was building out the American West. And the city of Chicago in Illinois, if you ever go to Chicago, you'll see the red stars. One of those red stars is for the Great Fire of Chicago. Chicago had a tiny little problem years ago. They burnt the city down. And I don't mean like a small, they burnt the entire bloody city down. The entire thing, ash. The city's gone. So somebody in Chicago had a great idea. I know, this is profound. Dude, let's not rebuild the entire city out of wood this time. Let's do something less flammable. I know, right? Wasn't that a good idea? So the city of Chicago picked up the phone. Oh, hello, this is Pittsburgh. Hey, Pittsburgh, yeah, it's Chicago. Yeah, how's it going? Great to talk to you. Yeah, by the way, we kind of burnt down our entire city. We need like all the steel you can lay on us. Can you ship it up here? Pittsburgh was like, yeah, sorry, we've got orders for the next like 4 years. Can't do. We'll put you at the top of the list. We'll get you first in line right now. You'll get. We'll be able to fill that order. We'll start immediately once we get our current orders done. You'll get your steel in about 10 years, right? Chicago's like, not cool, man. Not cool. Click. Chicago thought about it. Picked up the phone. Yo, it's Pittsburgh. What's up? Hey, it's Chicago again. Okay, so we get you can't do it. Would you mind just giving us the coke? We'll make our own steel here. We'll figure out how to make it. We'll just make our own steel. We'll make the steel we need. We get that you can't do it. Pittsburgh. No. Click. Why? Pittsburgh had the ownership of a scarce factor of production, the coke needed to make the steel, and weren't going to share. So what did they do? Well, with regards to a deal was struck with Chicago, because that's untenable. And let's be clear, if you're not allowing a major American city to rebuild because of that, to maintain your monopoly, that's going to attract political attention. So what Pittsburgh did is Pittsburgh eventually gave the coke over to Chicago, creating the Chicago steel industry. However, there was a deal done with Chicago. Chicago had to use something called Pittsburgh Plus pricing system. So anybody who wanted to buy steel, you had to calculate how much it would cost to buy that steel from and ship it all the way from Pittsburgh. Now, steel's heavy. That's a lot of money, especially when you're talking about San Francisco, Denver, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, right? The cost to get it from Pittsburgh, and they had to charge that price plus something more to buy it in Chicago. Translation, Chicago was never going to undercut Pittsburgh in price. Pittsburgh was always going to be the cheapest solution if it was available. Now, if you needed it in a pinch and it was an emergency and you're willing to pay a premium, fine, you can get it from Chicago. And that's how Pittsburgh relinquished its basically steel monopoly in favor of Chicago, and Chicago was able to break in. If you are able to secure a scarce factor of production in the United States, some guys in suits, usually coming in pairs, from the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice would love to come and have a conversation with you. And dependingly, they might be willing to give you 3 hots and a cot for it. All right. Next barrier to entry are called network externalities. Now these, you guys usually my students get network externalities pretty simple. Network externalities are really powerful. Okay. Do you guys remember MySpace? Or better yet, what was it, Google Plus? Where you had the Google circles. Do you remember this? Does anybody still use that anymore? In like the last 10 years, I've had like 2 students who are like, yeah, I used to use it. Yeah, I don't use it anymore. And I ask why. I said, well, nobody else uses it. Exactly. Facebook derives its value from the number of people who are in it. Why do people join Facebook or Instagram? Because everybody else is on it. Okay. Google tried to take on Facebook. Okay. Have you guys heard about Google? Google's nuts. Seriously. Right. Well, Google. You heard about the balloons? So what did Google do? Google had this great idea. Hey, let's get everybody internet. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these Wi-Fi antennas on these hot air balloons. And we're going to fly these hot air balloons over places that don't have internet. And then we're going to have a satellite uplink so that you can Wi-Fi to the balloon, and then the balloon will go up to the satellite, and there'll be a good connection. And then that's how we'll get internet. Don't laugh. This was actually done in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, because there was no other way to get internet connection into the people after it was destroyed. Google is nuts. Google picks fights, okay? So where does the Microsoft Corporation get the majority of its revenue from? Microsoft Office. So what did Google do? They made Google Docs and Google Sheets and all these other things, and they're basically giving them for free. That's an FU to Microsoft. So what did Microsoft do? They made Bing. Does anybody use Bing? I mean, at least it pays you for using it a little bit. You know, every month you get a free cup of coffee or something from Starbucks. But Google picked a fight with Microsoft and pretty well won it. Microsoft couldn't do much to Google. Google picked a fight with Facebook, trying to get in. And this network externality, barrier to entry of Facebook, was so strong, they repelled Google. Seriously. They successfully repelled Google. Dude. Google's crazy, and they pick fights with huge companies, and their barrier to entry, Facebook's barrier to entry, was able to repel Google. That's it. Guys, in the next 15, 20 years, you should expect, I would not be surprised if there was antitrust stuff going on with Facebook over this. that they're acting, if they're not careful and they act as a monopolist, there's a good chance that within the next 15, 20 years, you might see antitrust legislation against Facebook. So we already showed this. There's a deadweight loss. We already showed you this. Alpha Bravo Charlie, that's the deadweight loss from having a monopoly. Now, this exists in all but one case. This deadweight loss is predicated on an intellectual assumption, and that is the monopolist must charge everybody in the public the same price. Now, rent-seeking behavior is when the monopolist uses these economic profits to bribe, we live in the United States, we don't pay bribes. What do? Oh yes, political contributions, that's right. We don't do bribes, we do they make political contributions and lobbyists in order to create and preserve economic profits. And the government failure occurs when they do that. Now, there is a theoretical way to eliminate the deadweight loss of monopoly, and it's called price discrimination. So I used to like to fly a lot all the time, and it always dumbfounded me. Okay, I board a plane, I get on the plane, I go from city A to city B, right? I put my butt in a chair, get on plane, go from A to B. Someone else can put their butt in same chair, going from A to B, and pay a totally different price. But they're still going from A to B. What's up with that? It's called price discrimination. Airlines have figured out a way to charge different prices to different consumers based upon their willingness to pay. Why do movie theaters have senior and student discounts? Because they have less money to pay and they want to get more money out of it. But they make their revenue from date night and all these other things and charging on Friday, Saturday nights, charging higher rates. Price discrimination, if you can charge everybody different prices perfectly, you can eliminate the deadweight loss. So it works like this. Here's a normal monopoly. But what if the monopolist could charge each person on the demand curve as they come along a different price? That eliminates all consumer surplus. There is no consumer surplus. Everything becomes producer surplus. But as a result, marginal revenue then becomes the demand curve again, and the deadweight loss amount, that triangle, disappears because the firm will actually produce the correct quantity. I only have one example of this. It's up here. Let me get the pen going. It's up here in this region of perfect price discrimination. So for those of you who haven't ever used eBay, eBay is an auction site. You put in how much you think you're willing to pay, and it'll auction up to that price for you. Now, let's be clear. If I know I'm going to lose the bid, I am evil, okay? Sometimes if I know I'm going to lose, I'm going to put in bids just to screw the winner to make sure they pay the most. As a result, I come in second for a lot of auctions. I know I'm not going to win it, and I know pretty much how to figure out exactly where your maximum willingness to pay is, just so I push you all the way up. So a lot of times, so there's, let's say, for example, that red dot right there is first. So my willingness to pay is beneath it. A lot of times I get this email from eBay that says, by the way, the seller has a second one available, and they're willing to accept your said price. Just let us know, and they'll sell you one at that price. What are they doing? They're moving down the demand curve to number 2. They're willing to sell it there. Now, eBay has an incentive not to keep doing this because it lowers the total number of listings on their websites. Their basic listing fees and other things. But what is the seller doing? They're price discriminating 1 and 2, and they're getting all the producer surplus they can in that region. Now, I've never found a firm that can do this perfectly, but realize whenever you buy something online, firms actually will charge different prices. Clear your cookies, go to a different computer if you're buying something, or use a VPN, and you'll get totally different prices for the same good 1 minute to the next, just for buying the same thing. Firms can offer on the internet different prices to consumers for the same good based upon all kinds of different things. And what are they doing? They're trying to price discriminate to get more profits out. So in order for the price discrimination to work, you can't arbitrage, which means once you sell it, they can't resell it. Hotels do this, all kinds of people price discriminate to try to make more money. So what are the rules of monopoly? For those of you who are taking business law, I'm not going to belabor this. You've got the Sherman Act, you've got the Clayton Act. I'm sure you'll read it in the text. I'm not going to belabor it in the lecture. Here's what I want you to know. Who is going to knock on your door if you act as a monopolist and are not behaving like you should? You'll get the Federal Trade Commission, and you'll get the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. They would love to come and have some encouraging words to say with you. Beyond that, that's what I'm doing for the exam. So remember, market power is when you have some control over your price, and monopoly is when there's one, but the key idea is barriers to entry. So this helps describe, barriers to entry helps describe utilities, regulated monopolies. It helps describe pharmaceutical companies that often are under patent protection for theirs as to how they work. Next time we're going to do oligopoly to true it up in order to make it add some more firms that are a little better examples. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, please stop by office hours, come see me or give me a phone call. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.